guys, it's Kotek here. How you doing? Today I'm super stoked to let you know that my song Teleportal with Rezz just cracked 2 million plays on Spotify. So thank you so much for that. And to celebrate you, I figured I might just break down the project file a little bit. So let's get in it. Alright, so here's how it starts. Basically, Rezz hits me up one day and says, can you make a drop in the key of D? Don't write a break or a melody, just make a drop. She was being kind of secretive about the whole thing, but she basically just told me to go for it, so I came up with some pretty wild ideas, and I think I even pitched the idea of doing something in like 7/4, which she actually said she wasn't opposed to, but it ended up not working out. So anyway, this is what I sent her. So anyway, as you can see, it's a little different than the original version. There's a lot of similar components, but it did get changed a lot. I have a tendency to make things a little bit more complicated than they need to be, so that's why it's always nice working with Rezz, because she loves to simplify things. So 20 minutes later, she hits me up with a new version, and she's pretty much gone in and just cut out all the things she didn't like, and then did a simple rearrangement of the call and response pattern that ended up making way more sense than what I had written down. So the drop didn't really change too much after that. She pretty much just said, hey, I like these sounds, use them here, and then I went back and just put them back together in the project file to make it, work properly. All right, so let's go into the actual project here. All right, here it is. So as I was saying before, she wanted me to write a drop because she had a melody already, and she wanted to see if I could make something that would match it, but blind without having heard it. So after we organized the drop and made something that was gonna work, she sends me this. Right away, I was like, this is awesome. I love the little percussion thing. I love the little guitar line. I love the melody of the plucks and everything about this was awesome. Anyway, so this goes on for the rest of it, and you kind of get the idea. So the first thing that I noticed about this that was super awesome is actually the harmony that she was using for this. So let's take a look at that. So everything starts on D, and then the melody immediately goes to C sharp, which I thought was really cool because C sharp is not actually part of the key D minor, which means that she's actually using some pretty advanced harmony, which blows my mind because she didn't have any actual musical training in that. She just hears these things in her head, which is like super, super cool and very impressive. So what's happening is we're starting on D and then immediately modulating to A major, which comes from the D harmonic minor scale. Right? So that A major is super special because it's got a bunch of extra tension in it that really wants to pull the harmony back up, and that usually would resolve to D. But in this situation, she's actually used what's called the deceptive cadence and resolved that A major up to the submediant chord, in this case, B flat major. But here's where things get crazy. The next chord she plays is B major, which is not even close to in the key. And that's super cool. So the first thing I wanted to do when I started writing some more stuff on this is figure out where all that extra harmony was coming from. And the most important one to me was figuring out that B major chord, which it turns out comes from the parallel major scale, which is just a D major scale. So that means in that moment, the song has actually shifted from D minor to D major, which is actually a pretty normal thing. But that means now I have access to all of the major chords instead of just the minor chords. So in this case, usually if I'm playing a G in the bass, it would end up being a minor chord because it has all of the notes from the minor chord inside D minor. But when we're playing B major, that chord on top of G becomes a G major 7. Which is super cool because this opens up so many options harmonically for us that we can pretty much go anywhere we want. This is really cool to me because we've got chords from D minor, we've got keys from D harmonic minor, we've got keys from D major, and then we've also got some chord substitutes that are completely outside the key. And we managed to slip all of that in there sneakily without making it sound like it was forced or overdone. And that's really difficult. So props to Rezz for being able to write something that would inspire such amazing melodies and harmony. Let's talk a little bit about the sound design. So this sound was actually what inspired the original idea in the first place. I had just gotten back from Shambhala when I started writing this, and I had this weird idea in my head that I wanted to use this sort of like clunky, plunky sort of thing. I don't know how to explain it, but then I came across this plugin here. The one and only Native Instruments Contact, the sample libraries from heaven. But they've got this really cool library here called Kinetic Metal, and it doesn't even matter which preset I grab. Probably not bowed cymbals. Let's try a different one here. Dirt Shovel. Let's try Dirt Shovel. So this is basically just a bunch of crazy gears, and they do some things. You can dial in these parameters, and it's like not very user-friendly for like getting something specific, but it is definitely designed to just kind of play with and make some cool sounds. So that's what I did, is I just I fiddled with it for a little while, and then I ended up making this giant file here of just weird sounds from it. But that's the fun of resampling, is you just kind of record a whole bunch of stuff and then go back in and take out the stuff that sounds cool. So yeah, I made that sound, and then knowing that it was going to come as the lead into the drop, I just threw it into the break section here and then filtered it out and used some grain delay to get that that little climbing thing. And this is sitting really far back in the mix on the song. I think I had it at like negative 19 decibels, so you might not even notice it unless you turn the song up really high. But these sort of little subtle things really help to bring the song forward, and it implies this sort of like, I knew what I was going to do next sort of thing, because you hinted at it back before everybody heard it. So anyway, we needed to make a lead in that went from this break to this drop, which actually I think was the one part of the song that we spent the most time going back and forth about. We tried a couple different options, but then we ended up settling for coming in with like a straight up hard cut shift to a fat guitar chord. And I just get to play that, and it's super fun, a bunch of open strings. And then I just grabbed a bunch of tom samples and wrote this drum line underneath to keep the groove going a little bit during the section so that everybody still knows where the time is. And then we back it up with a little spirally thingy. And it's sort of a pseudo build. It doesn't really like build in the standard like acceleration way that we usually hear, but it's more like a space of time where everything is kind of unsettled and just moving upwards. So then we get to the drop. Let's take a look at that real quick. So the main sound in this drop is actually coming from the same bass that I used on the last drop of Surface, if any of you guys have heard that, but it's this guy right here. And I'm very happy to say that I made this one from scratch with Operator, and this bass has stuck with me for a very long time. And if you're curious, that tone is generated by a high-pass filter. So now you know. So anyway, I was super stoked that she picked this sound to use as the main sound because it was something that I actually had control of. And then we just sprinkled all of the little spaces in between with snippets and cuts from that original project that I sent her. These little guys and this guy, and then I think I've got some stuff up here. Yeah, some more of these. Whoop. Yeah, that one's always fun. I spent a long time warping these to get this rhythm right because it's not really like on time, you know. It's like tickety-tack, you know, it's like it's a triplet, you know, but it's like a little bit swung, you know, and so it's kind of cool because this song is very like 4 on the floor, and the main pulse and the rhythms are all just kind of right on the beat. So these little things, those are what kind of give the song its like bouncy sort of feel, which I think is really cool. So then it was just a matter of going in and sort of detailing all the space between those sounds and gluing them together with things like slips, you know, little suction things that kind of move the song forward. Not very many drums going on in here. Obviously some Kashmir samples because everybody knows that Kashmir makes the best samples. And then of course halfway through I decided to layer that main bass sound with my guitar just to feel like I was doing a little extra. So after the drop, I kind of wanted to chill everything out a little bit before we set up the next break. So I decided to kind of go for a more jazz style orchestration. So I used some keys and an acoustic bass here which sound really nice. Woo. Yeah, oh, and then the harp. Don't forget the harp. Yeah, this was one of my favorite parts of the song. And then we get to the second drop, where I usually like to switch things up a bit, so we threw this fill right in at the beginning. And I love that. It just kind of takes everybody out of the song for a second and then reminds us that we're all together at the same time, just because it's like super dry and that one bass kind of hits you in the face, and I just love doing that stuff. The rest of the second drop is pretty much the same as the first drop, except for a couple things we changed here and there just to keep it interesting. But we really liked what we had already, so we didn't want to overdo it and change things too much. Alright, that pretty much sums it all up. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I got a bunch of new stuff coming out this year that I'm super excited for, so stay tuned, because I will see you soon. Peace.